Hey guys, welcome back to the Hypertrophy Academy YouTube. Today we have a very special video, a podcast, if you will. I'm on with Jake. How you doing today, man?
I'm good, mate. I'm good.
All right, guys. So if you don't know Jake already, you should, and I don't know why you don't, but I will hand over to Jake and let him introduce himself a bit more in depth so you guys have a good idea of who he is and what he does. And Jake, I actually don't know this one, but I have a good idea. I'd love to know how you got into this side of the industry. I know you're a big old school bodybuilding fan, just a bodybuilding fan in general. So maybe if you could touch on that for us as well, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, cool. I was having a little laugh to myself, Declan, because I was waiting to see if you were going to attempt to say my last name or not. It's always fun for me on podcasts if people give me to go.
I was
Um,
gonna say Doleschal. Is that right?
well, you would have nailed it. Yeah, 100%.
Yes. There you
Yeah.
go.
So I sort of fell into this. My background was actually in totally unrelated. I studied philosophy. I worked in social work, and I always was kind of, I guess, interested in health and fitness, and had done all my fitness certifications and kind of just did it for fun. Yeah. And then I got to a point where there was people really close to me, loved ones who just weren't seeing good results in the gym, and they sort of had these health issues that were holding them back. And it got to a point where gone to who I looked at as some of the best coaches I knew, and they weren't getting results. And at a certain point, I was like, okay, I'm going to see what I can do about this. And that led me down an odd rabbit hole where I started learning heaps about blood work and functional testing and functional health. And I found that a lot of the people that I knew that weren't getting good results that had health blocks. And that's sort of eventually the work I was doing for like charities and social work that they kind of closed up and shut down. And then I started doing coaching full time. And my experience, I guess, became exponentially greater in the sense that suddenly I was getting all these clients who had gone all over the world, some of the best coaches, hadn't got results. And it seemed like all these people I was attracting had these health issues that were stopping them from getting good results. And so it led me further down this rabbit hole of, again, functional health and lab work and autoimmunity. And suddenly for what started as a passion for strength training and helping people get body comp results, I was now suddenly getting people who had no interest at all in the gym. They were, people who were bedridden, who had chronic disease, chronic health issues. And suddenly that became what I was doing for the next few years. And I remember at a point, like, especially during COVID, where gyms were shut and people weren't really training a lot, I was like, how did I fall into this? This isn't what I signed up for. I signed up to do strength coaching. Like, I kind of just like lifting heavy things. And now I'm doing this totally like different work. Anyway, so I got to a point after COVID where I was like, look, I feel like I've kind of moved a little bit away from my first love, which was training and strength coaching. And what I found really interesting, I don't know if a lot of people know this, is bodybuilding largely had its roots in functional health. Like if we go back to late 1800s, early 1900s, what we see is bodybuilding naturally kind of was set up opposed to the dominant medical system at the time. And that was set like, I guess, spreading a different narrative of what good health looked like that was oppositional to, just a pill for every ill. And for me, it felt like, oh, I found my home. I found what it looks like to actually combine body composition and strength coaching and strength training with functional health and optimal health or whatever you want to call it. And so I guess over the last few years, I've been a little bit more vocal about trying to combine those two. And so I guess I'm in a funny position where I work mostly with people who have either, medical conditions where they're bedridden, can't work, can't do anything, or I work with like bodybuilding athletes, people who want to get on stage, people who just want to build as much muscle as possible. So it feels like two different audiences. And I guess in some ways it is, but that's sort of the space that I try to occupy.
It's interesting that you actually need to have two separate pages. I think that sort of speaks to the issue of the fact that people are sort of ignorant to both sides, right? I think we have like the health side where some people are ignorant to how much strength training will help them. And then the strength training side, people like me, for example, might be ignorant to, how much like saffron, for example, I commented on one of your posts recently, might be super, super helpful and, how supplements have a place. So from memory, your health page is a decent size bigger. Is that what occupies most of your time?
I would say my time is split sort of 50-50. Um, but in the industry is a little bit interesting in and I'm sure you would see this in the fitness industry, is that there's different narratives, there's different sort of camps and beliefs and tribes, and I would say, there's stuff that, and I'm sure it's going to come up today, that we would probably see slightly differently on, but there's a lot of commonality and overlap in our approaches. And whatever you want to call that camp or that group or that belief system that we're part of, or at least that we share some beliefs of, that's a fairly dominant narrative now. Whereas I think the space I occupy in the functional health world, that is a smaller space. And so I think there's not as many people who are doing what I'm doing in that side of things. And that's why I'm getting a lot of attention. I get people from all over the world who have exhausted all other possibilities, really. They've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, decades trying to fix their health, haven't got anywhere. So I think that's sort of the difference, is that there's just not as much airtime. And I guess even from I don't want to get too controversial here, but even during COVID, like a lot of my stuff on my health page, like I was having content deleted, like censored really heavily. I was getting kicked off social media. And a lot of the time I wouldn't even make a comment. I would just share a study. I would just share a peer-reviewed study, and I would get told this violates terms and conditions, and I'd be kicked off, right? So I think there has been suppression of some of that information that we don't see in the fitness world. So I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. I think that could be a whole podcast on its own, sort of what happened during COVID. And I sort of come from I mean, you wouldn't call it a conspiracy theory background, but I'm interested in that sort of thing. But I think that the divide in the industry is something that I want to talk about. And we sort of are seeing more than ever, maybe a very big divide right now, maybe the biggest divide since when science-based lifting started, where it was just this new thing that was, stupid or whatever. And I think that I don't know the exact phenomenon that it is, but whenever you enter into a debate, instead of getting closer to a conclusion, you force both parties deeper into their own beliefs. I don't know what that's called, but basically we're seeing this, science versus, whatever you want to call it, bro argument. And instead of coming to some sort of agreement, right? Like you and I, for example, we do things very slightly differently with sets or reps or whatever, however we do it, but in general we agree on most things, and we follow a similar group of principles, and we can sort of agree to disagree on some things just based on preference, really, and then move forward. But in an industry, and in the current industry, we're seeing just logical fallacy from both sides, assigning beliefs to the other party, then attacking the belief, even though that party didn't even say that thing or doesn't believe it in the first place. And both sides are terrible for that. And we and the science side do it all the time, not us. Hopefully, fingers crossed, not me. But it's a big problem. And I just wonder what you're very factual, and I'd say kind is the right word as well in your replies and that sort of thing. And you still get hate. Whereas someone like me, maybe I'm a bit more closed-minded. I could see someone like me getting more hate than you, but it actually doesn't work out that way. And for whatever reason, like your stuff seems to get a big kickback, even though it's just like, here's a study, here's what it said, this is how you could use it. Whereas because I make sort of more like, I guess you could call it entertaining style, like the editing's nice, like, whatever. I have to be a bit more reductionist, and I can't explain things as well because I have to hold people's attention, right? Because I'm trying to reach like a big audience, and it's just a slightly different approach. And yet I'm not getting hate, even though sometimes I don't reference anything. I don't use any data. I just say, this is what I believe. You'd think that would be something that would be more susceptible to disagreement and hate. And yet data and science itself, with just a quick recommendation, is apparently a way bigger issue for people. And I don't know how we got there or why, but what do you think about all of that?
That's interesting. I didn't know you don't get hate. So this is interesting information to me.
I mean, I get the comments here and there. I had someone comment on my post today, and it was like, I made that reaction. I sort of stepped away from reaction videos because I think, like, yourself, you've done some really good ones where it's just like, you don't do what everyone does and just shit on the person. JPG is another good example. I've spoken to him about this a few times. He's really good at just doing a reaction and giving constructive criticism. So is Evan Holmes, right? whereas other people would do it the wrong way. I sort of stepped away from that kind of thing. Yesterday, I did the one where I just sort of like, shake my head at the 2 reps to failure is better than 8, or, whatever the claim was. Just some guy like, ripping the stimulating reps theory and, twisting it. But one of the comments was like, isn't this really bad for tendons? And I just said no. Because like, I mean, we've spoken about rehab, right? And you would have with squats, like tendons like slow, and then they like heavy and slow, and then you move back to just normal strength training. And I just said no. Like I didn't have time to go into a big explanation. He's like, oh, just no science, no explanation. I think I'll take my comment elsewhere. It's like, you asked me a question. I'm a rehab specialist. I gave you the correct simple answer, and it's just like, so sometimes I get comments like that. I guess hate now, not as much, but I'd love to hear you speak to it.
I mean, there's so much there. There's so many things that you've just alluded to that I think is a really interesting phenomenon in the way social media and the way humanity and sort of public psyche works. To go right back to that first statement you made about, and, I don't even like the language of sides. It's like, what, we got science-based lifting and anti-science. Like, literally, they are identifying as anti-science-based, which is a weird identification in and of itself. But it is obviously just a reaction, yeah? So you've got people who people have perceived or observed as being science-based, and then you've got the people who are against those people. No one is against science. Like, I don't believe anyone is actually saying, I'm anti-science. What they're saying, what they don't even know they're saying is, I'm against these individuals who identify as science-based, right? And then you sort of identify that what's happening in this space is people are just strawmanning each other, and they're just saying, well, you believe this and they don't. And then they're tearing down that sort of false belief, and then it's going back and forth. And I think a much more compelling way of looking at this would be, what are you seeing that I'm not seeing? Right. And that doesn't mean, so what I'd love to do, and I don't want to name names, but I'm sure some of these people. There's people who their whole shtick is just calling out science-based lifters, right? And a few days ago, I thought to myself, oh, okay, one of these guys who's chronic to this, he started following me. So I'm like, okay, it's probably just a matter of time before I get called out. And I thought, should I just block him now? And I thought, no. Actually, what I want to do is, I want to wait. I want to get called out. I want to see, what are you seeing about me that I'm not seeing? Is there anything here that's going to be helpful for me, right? And look, maybe I'm giving him a little bit too much credit. Maybe there's not going to be, and maybe it's just going to be a straw man argument. But what I'd love is for the narrative to be, actually help me be a better science-based lifter. Tell me what it is that you think I'm doing that doesn't make sense. Let me see me the way you're seeing me, and let's see what I can actually do better, right? And that's what I tried to do with some of those critique videos or calling out videos or whatever you call them, where instead of saying, hey, this person, so what I've tried to do is find people who have what looks like an exact opposing view to me. And instead of saying, hey, this view is the opposite of what I've said, here's why it's wrong, what I've tried to do, and maybe not successfully, is say, here's a view that's exactly opposite to mine, here's why it's right, and here's why mine's right as well. Because there's a lot of nuance, and that doesn't mean that physiology differs, right? I'm not saying that your physiology is different from my physiology, different from, Joe Blow's physiology. What I'm saying is, there's an art to this as well. It's not just science, right? We can sit back and we can say, okay, these are the principles of muscle physiology and this is the way muscle grows, and that's amazing. But we can also then take that and say, well, here's 10 different ways we can use that. And there's some ways we can't use it. There's some things that people are doing that do make no sense. And I think that's okay to educate people on, hey, this is actually just a really inefficient way of trying to get to your goal. But then, and you touch on the fact that there's things we do differently. Yeah, because there is, a sense of art to this where, hey, you can do, and I try to post about this, like you can do 10 different exercises, 15 different exercises, do one set. I do a lot of that. I know you don't like that. You would prefer to do 5 exercises, do 2, 3, 4 sets. That's fine, right? This is where it comes down to preferences, what's going to work for that individual. Is there issues around accessibility, equipment, loading stuff? Like there's a whole lot of other factors we need to consider. So that would be one point I'd make is, hey, maybe this industry could be better if we actually tried to learn from each other instead of just trying to shit on each other, right? And I don't know that that's going to change. And I think part of why that's not going to change is that's not what social media wants. Yeah. I mean, as well as I do, the algorithm doesn't want that. The algorithm doesn't want someone saying something nice and gentle about someone and no one getting any engagement about it. What they want is someone being as controversial as possible, getting as many comments as possible. I mean, like, for me, the only posts I have that do well are the ones that get heaps and heaps and heaps of hate. And the more hate I get, the better my post does. Now, I'm not going out of my way looking for hate, but that's ultimately the way this, social media world is set up. Is
I mean, at the end of the day, we're running businesses, right? And we have to, sometimes you have to do something that is, going to push that forward. That what allows us to do our jobs is that we have a constant influx of people, whether it's views or clients or whatever. And so, yeah, like, obviously you're not going to go farming hate. But like, if you're writing a post and you go, there's a way I can say this that no one will care about, and there's a way I can say this that might drive up the engagement. At the end of the day, I'm a business. I have to sometimes make a post that does well to make sure that I'm moving forward. I think that there's a time and a place for that, as long as it's done in a like you said, you're not looking for it, but maybe there's some, maybe you look at the wording and you change it around and see if someone gets upset about it. That there's always a threshold for that. I do a little bit of that too. Sometimes I'll reword something and be like, this is still technically right, but I'm going to say it this way, and just see if anyone gets upset about it. But that's just part of marketing, right? That's just sales in general. There's a threshold where that just becomes your whole thing. You don't have any original stuff. Your whole thing is shitting on other people, and I don't like that. And I actually know the guy that, I know who you're referring to, who followed you. I've spoken to him. He's actually quite a scientific dude behind the scenes. I forget what he told me he has. He has a degree in like neuroscience or some like engineering, like something pretty science-based. And I
think I know what it is. I think it's the same thing I have a degree in, but I won't say it because we're going to identify who this person is.
Anyone listening will know who it is anyway. But yeah, and he might be. And I've spoken to him, and he's actually a nice guy, a nice enough guy behind the scenes, and not anti-science at all. And he's actually asked me some questions about, science, and he's been quite interested, and I'm sure he followed you for the same reason. He told me that what he doesn't like is the way it's delivered. And so, like, obviously we don't have to speak about him specifically, but I can speak from experience based on what I've been told and what I can understand about the opposing side, that like they just don't like how it's being delivered sometimes. So for the example, the video I posted this morning, you probably didn't see it because you were working, but I basically just said, look, I understand where people are coming from when they're annoyed about science-based lifting. For example, I saw a video that of someone I follow duetted, and the video was like, if you ever feel stupid, just remember there are people doing 3 sets. And it's like, okay, we understand how fatigue works. We understand that the more we do, the less effective it is. But you can just say that. You don't have to say the engagement farming rubbish like that that gives all of us a bad look. Now, I've completely stopped associating with that side. I don't know if you've noticed, but some people listening might notice I took a break from content in general. And then when I came back, I really shifted things because I was like, this is giving me a really bad look, being associated with these sort of people who, and I, a year and a half ago, I made posts I'm not proud of that you can't find anymore, and I shouldn't have spoken not that I ever used the word stupid or anything like that, but I've definitely changed my tone and my approach to things because I don't want to ever seem condescending or arrogant or anything like that. And maybe I do sometimes, but there are definitely people who give you a bad look, right? Because there's always references that it's always very, scientific, of course, very practical as well. But even just using a PubMed reference just gives you such a bad look by association, not you specifically, but in the eyes of these people. Like, it's just like, oh, that's a study reference. Even if the study's like, form doesn't matter, like that the lateral raise study where they cheated. Even if that was the study, it's like, oh, now form doesn't matter. It's like, that's what you've been saying. That's what you just don't like it because now it's in a study. And so just by association, it's you get a bad rap.
Yeah. It is interesting, that aversion to published research now. And, to a small scale, I kind of get it. Like, I was actually talking to someone about that this morning, where there's a couple of science-based people, again, people we would probably both follow, and both of them over the last week have done these big, those reels where it's like you get a million studies flashing up on the screen, and like you don't really get long enough to look at any one of them, but they just speak at it, and kind of you assume that study confirms what it is they're saying. And both these people I followed, I saw that someone in the comments had been like, that study doesn't say that. Like, that study didn't measure that. That stood for this. Like, you said it stood for this, and it actually stood for that. And in both times they're like, oh, whoops, I used wrong study. And I'm like, you didn't just use wrong study. You didn't read it. Like you just put together your goal here is a content creator. Your goal is not to be an educator, right? And that's the problem. I think that why people are reacting so heavily is because people are misusing studies. Either they're not reading them, interpreting them correctly at all in that instance, and they're just trying to use it as an appeal to authority, or people are not really understanding what it is that the study is even telling us. Like the study doesn't tell us. And, this is the whole issue with beginner studies, because people will be like, oh, that's a study in beginners. And it's like, yeah, okay, sometimes that doesn't work. I get that. Okay. Like there's things we can't apply to that because there is difference in physiology in beginners, but there's some physiology which is the same in beginners and that we can apply. So I think what's happened is people have incorrectly used science or used studies over time, been like, oh, look, I guess the example coming to mind would be stretch mediated hypertrophy. And it's like, oh, look, beginners grew this much in, stretch exercises. Therefore, we saw this the last 2 years. Everyone needs to do every single exercise in the stretch position. Suddenly we find out, well, that doesn't work at all the way we thought it did because that's beginners. And then people are like, oh, well, therefore science is, rubbish and studies rubbish. And therefore we can't use any research on beginners. It's like, well, no, we just need to look at what's the physiological difference in a beginner, right? So I think sometimes I think it gets too hard. So someone will be like, well, and I don't think this is a conscious belief. I think it's unconscious where, and I mean, goodness, like I'm sure maybe you felt like this before as well. It's almost like the Dunning-Kruger effect where you start to realize, holy moly, there's so much to this. Like muscle physiology is not straightforward. I mean, I've been in this game like, God, I don't know, a long time. I mean, I did my fitness qualifications a bit over 10 years ago now. And I've been really passionate about this since before that. Like, I mean, reading every single book I can get my hands on. Like, I remember getting, Schoenfeld's books back when I was still, I think, in high school. Like, this is something, I spent a lot of my time doing. And still the muscle physiology is bloody confusing. I've done a postgraduate degree looking at muscle physiology and the people teaching it are confused by it and often making really obvious mistakes about it as well, right? So
do you remember any of the mistakes?
Yeah, I mean, they don't understand any of the fatigue stuff whatsoever, at least where I studied. And this was only a year or two ago.
Is this X science or phys?
It was medical science, but it was, the unit was, I think it was just muscle physiology. But
I've had a few people ask me if they should do exercise science degrees in Australia to become coaches because I did X science, X phys, so 4 years total at Griffith on the Gold Coast. And I'm always like, if you want to be a coach, do not do that. You can spend, $3,000 on Chris, spend money on Joe Bennett, go through whatever. Like you could spend, if you spent, it cost me 36 Australian, so 36 grand. If you spent that much on the right courses outside of, oh my God, you could get like 20 different courses. I'm not obviously not going to plug my own, but you could get so many and have such a good base of information. Like I remember going through uni and really not learning. I don't want to say I didn't learn anything, but I was a decent powerlifter at the time. I'd been coaching. I really did not come out of any classes going, oh, wow, which is a shocking because I was completely stupid at the time. And like you said, I still feel like I'm very early on in the Dunning-Kruger where I'm like, okay, I've been through Chris's mentorship. Let me go through those videos again. And then I'm like, I'm about to do Joe Bennett's biomechanics one as well. And I'm constantly trying to learn and keep moving forward. But, there is a shocking, the curriculum is shocking and there's really nowhere to get good, information.
There's simply not, I get that question all the time as well. I started the first degree I was enrolled in. I did 2 years of a sports degree at one of the best universities in Melbourne. And I quit that before I finished my degree and I went to TAFE to do my fitness certifications instead. And they almost laughed me out of the TAFE. I went in and said, I've got 2 years of a sports degree. Can you give me any RPL? And they said, no, we can't. And they said, any one of our students would kill to swap places with you. I'm like, but why? I'm not learning anything. I'm not learning how to be a coach. Like this is not helpful information whatsoever. Now the TAFE course is not any better, but at least I got my certification and I could actually then go learn what I need to learn and actually work, right? But that's the reality. I tell people this all the time. A big chunk of my work, I haven't said this, most of my work is actually mentoring coaches and practitioners. And I always get asked by them, what should they do, what courses, etc. And I would say, look, do the course that certifies you to do the work you want to do. Right. So if that's a fitness cert, do that. Whatever work you want to do, find the way to actually get certified so you can do that. And then your job is basically to unlearn most of what you had to learn in that course and go identify the people who are doing the work you want to do the best. Who are the best coaches who are working with the people you want to work with, and pay them to learn from them, because they'll have decades of experience and you can fast track your journey by just paying them for their experience.
Someone actually asked a question, or two questions on this topic. Someone said they feel like they're stuck in an education loop as a coach. Should they focus more on business? And we also had a question, if you had to restart your coaching journey, how would you go about it? And I think we should start on that second one, because it's kind of what we're talking about right now. If we had to restart, I think that my degree pushed me in the direction I got to today. So if we refer to like the butterfly effect, if you're familiar with it, everyone, like if you undo something from the past, the future's different, the present's different, whatever. So like, yes, going to uni and studying for 4 years got me in the rehab job that I currently do now, which I never talk about, which is like sports rehab. I also do NDIS. So I've sort of been around some of the patients that you were referring to earlier. And it sort of pushed me to where I am now. But if I could guarantee this outcome, like if I could, I'd get back here where I am now because I love what I do. No, I would never have gone to uni. I would have saved $36,000 that I have to pay off with my tax each year, and 4 years of my time. And I would have spent that amount of money on, working with you, doing something like my course, Chris, Joe, and whoever I could. But if I had to restart, I would do exactly what you just said. I would get the minimum qualification I need. So in Australia, it's like $4,000, like 2,000 USD, get Cert 3 and Cert 4. You can be a PT on the gym floor. And then I guess by default, you can also, I don't think you need any qualification to coach online. I think there's just like you just can't like write meal plans or whatever. And I would just start there. And then I would spend as much as I possibly could on education. And Hormozy has a good saying. It's like, spend as much as you possibly can on education until you make enough money that you couldn't possibly spend that on education because you make way too much. And I think that's, for online coaches, like, I think that's a pretty good, like, if you literally couldn't use your, like, spend all your money on education until it's not even possible anymore because there's no education left, I think that's a pretty good start. Now, obviously, maybe that's speaking from a place of privilege. Like when I did my degree, I lived at home and we live in a great country and that sort of thing. That could be very different elsewhere. But I know that coaches sort of, they start and they're like, I'll get education later because like I don't really have the money to throw around now. It's like, look, if you just threw that money around now, you took a risk and did it, you'd be way better off. And like you said, you'd fast track your gains, your progress as a coach, and you'd be where you want to be faster. And you wouldn't make as many mistakes getting there. So, I don't know, what would you do differently?
See, I don't know how the game is different now in terms of actually getting in from a business perspective. And what I mean by that is that quote you shared from Alex, that's basically exactly what I did. The first 2 years I worked, I spent more on education than my income was, right? And so I was working additional jobs to subsidize that. I was actually dumpster diving. I wasn't even buying food. I was just eating food that was getting chucked out. Like literally, I was living as cheaply as possible and I was spending $20,000, $30,000 plus on education each year. And then I got to a point where my income was now at a point where, like you said, I couldn't spend that on education. Now I still spend about $80,000 a year on education each year, right? Like it's by far the biggest expense of my life. But what I assumed and what worked out for me at that point in time is I identified those two different ways coaches were going. And one was what you said there, where it's like, work in the business first and then education later. And the other one was just become as knowledgeable as you can, and then clients will follow. And I went down that approach. And for me, I honestly believe it worked. And I mean, most of my work is more in that health space. And since the day I started my business, I've been booked out, and that was, 7 years ago or whatever. But I don't know if that's how stuff works anymore. I don't know if you can just, like my mantra all along was to educate people, show people how I can help them without charging them anything. And then the people who need me will know that I can actually help them and will then book in, pay me to do it. But it's not even just a saturation. It's that there's so many people who are now positioning themselves as experts, right? And I don't know that the layperson can actually distinguish who is an expert and who isn't. So I don't know that acquiring that knowledge now and just being as knowledgeable and educated as you can be will necessarily stand out. I think more likely what it's going to do, and this is the sad state of social media, is more likely people who are not putting their time into education, but putting their time into marketing and content creation will be able to see that you're the expert and will probably just take the education, the content that you're sharing, put it into a more palatable, entertaining format, and then probably get clients based off your content. So for me, at the point in time that I started, I would have done things the way I did it. I would have spent all my money on educators and mentors, and that's exactly what I did. But if I were to do that now, I don't know if I would have a business.
I mean, I think that's a great point. I never even thought of it like that. Actually, there's so many people like us. I hate to group us in with anybody, but like there are so many of us that it's like, yeah, you're right. Like demonstrating knowledge is actually not, it's actually frowned upon now because you get hate for saying this and that. And it's like, I think that what stands out now is the ability to be nuanced, you know, and it's the reason that, like, for example, the guy we were speaking about earlier hasn't made a video on me or you yet. Because it's delivered, you're clearly educated, but it's not delivered in a way that is farming, rage bait, engagement. I see people trying to go viral all the time, and it's as someone who like doesn't need to do that really. I just think like come on, like
yeah,
I know what you're doing here. Like I understand what you're looking for. You're probably struggling to grow your page or your business or whatever, but going about it that way doesn't get you far. But I think the biggest thing to speak to in this question in general is you have to be likable, and you have to, people don't care about who's the smartest or who has the best. People don't even care about testimonials and transformation posts anymore. Like it works, but it's like people be way more interested in someone telling a story or having a personal brand. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with JP, who is, he's blowing up at the moment. He was one of my students. He does the green screen videos, and his whole thing is like the right. And I don't know, you've probably seen a video or two, but you guys listening would know him. And he's smart and he's likable, but he's a big personality, but in a really good way. And so his page is literally blowing up. He's like millions of views on videos and stuff, and he's killing it. And he uses the same information that follows the same principle. He went through my course, so I know what he knows, and he's just really likable. So I think that, you know, this question about being stuck in an education loop is like, stay in that loop forever. You're not stuck in it. You're in it. You want to be there. Like, you know, like you said, I don't spend quite, you know, 80,000 a year, but I'm as much as I can time wise investing in education. And I wouldn't say I was stuck. I'd say I'm always learning. And I think that feeling stuck maybe indicates that you're doing the right thing because you're constantly looking to learn new things maybe. But the business side of things just, it pushes you. You have to do that stuff. I don't think you should go out and look for it, because when you get a certain amount of clients, a certain amount of followers, when you need an editor, when you get an employee, whatever, it will force you to do that stuff. That stuff will come. Education is, you know, no one's going to force you to do that. But I think my answer to that question would just be, you've got to be likable, and there needs to be personal branding. Tell a story, be a person, not a robot or a human or someone who's regurgitating Patreon articles. And I think that's probably the best way to stand out now, because the point you made about the education thing, the expertise, that's a great point. You're not going to stand out. No, there's just too many.
Did you start in the gym?
I started coaching two friends from school, and then I was powerlifting at the time. And so I started coaching just online, just from powerlifting. And then I did a year in a world gym. So I've worked with Gen Pop. I've also worked with NDIS doing rehab stuff. So I've sort of worked with all populations, but it was like powerlifting in a gym. And then sort of from there, it was like powerlifting and bodybuilding. And now just, you know, what I do now.
So when you started World Gym, did you have like a senior coach who was like a mentor? Did you have to meet up with someone once a week or something like that?
No, it was just terrible environment. Did you have that? Because that'd be awesome.
So in one of the gyms, I worked at a gym called Clean Health Fitness Institute. I'm not sure if you've heard of them. They were in Sydney, and they were heavily involved with Charles Poliquin before Charles passed. And at the time, I would say they were renowned as the premier gym in Australia at the very least, and one of the, if not the most in the world. And I was living in Melbourne. I was working two different jobs, and I got an interview with Clean Health, And I spoke to the CEO on a Friday evening, and he said to me, look, if you want this job, you be here Monday morning or you don't get it. So I gave notice that evening to the 2 jobs I was working. The next morning, I packed up my car, packed up my whole life, and I drove up to Sydney. And for the next 12 weeks or whatever it was, I was paid $500 a week. And I was doing probably 60 plus hours. I was doing 50, 60 sessions a week. So I would say that's more than double full time for most PTs. And I took a pay cut to be paid, basically as a slave, knowing that was a place where I could get the best education possible. Knowing that I was effectively paying to learn, I was paying to be surrounded by the best, or being paid very little to be surrounded by the best coaches I could be, to be exposed to, international educators who are coming in. We had people like Lane Norton mentor us. We had, Thibodeau was involved with us, Charles, obviously some pretty significant people back in the day. And I knew that I needed to do that in order to long-term make anything of myself. And I don't mean to be known. I mean just to develop my own skill set. Yeah. And I think nowadays what I've seen with this transition, like at that point in time, we were almost the only place in the world doing online coaching. John Meadows was doing online coaching, and there was maybe 1 or 2 other people, and that was it. So we very much pioneered that in Australia, to the point that I was going to other gyms running education courses on how to do online coaching. This is, 2018 or whatever it was. And obviously COVID hit, and then suddenly everyone became an online coach. But when everyone became an online coach, they did away with being in the gym. And what they lost was that opportunity, A, to be surrounded by coaches who were better than you and more experienced than you, and B, in good settings, to actually, like what we had at Clean Health was we had to meet with a mentor every week. I had 2 other mentors I was paying separately on top of that. But at the very least, we had a senior coach, and we would go through every single one of our clients. What were we doing? What was working? What wasn't working? What results were they getting? Like, we would actually get a pay cut or a pay rise depending on how well that client was doing. Like, it was really hard and incentivized, right? And now people are like, oh, what should I do? I know, I'll become an online coach. And then out of nowhere, they just start marketing a page tomorrow, and they don't have any experience. They don't have anyone guiding them. And for me, I don't think that's a good way of doing it, because I think you lose so much experience that you can only get on the gym floor. But that's sort of a question in and of itself. Like, that's a separate topic. But what I would say is, if you are an online coach, you need to understand that for all of like gym coaching, personal training history up until like 2 years ago, you usually were paying a fee to be in a gym. Like, you were paying either, a few $100
a week.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or, the first gym, or the second gym I worked at, they were taking 50% of whatever I brought in. Like, you were paying good money to be in a gym. And if you're lucky, hopefully that meant that you were getting supervision and you were getting a senior coach who was mentoring you. But at the very least, you're getting access to the facility. Now, if you're online, you don't need to pay that. You're paying very little overheads. You're paying for an editing software, and that's about it, right? So what I would say to coaches,
premium.
exactly, Canva, whatever. What I say to coaches is that money you should have been paying, $400, $300, $500, whatever it was a week, take that and invest it in a mentor, because you've lost that mentor. You're not getting that anymore. You don't get that online. And it's not going to fully replace what you could have got, because you're not getting the hands-on experience, but it is going to be absolutely invaluable. So, to your point, stay in the education loop. Like, you've got to be a lifelong learner. Like, you need to do that. But also, don't forget how important it is to have coaches who are further along than you are, who are more experienced than you are. I mean, the amount of evidence-based coaches that I see nowadays, and they act like they're an authority and an expert, and they'll be like, here's my 2 clients that I've coached. And it's like, wait, what? Like, literally, you started coaching 6 months ago. You've had 2 clients. This is nothing. Talk to me when you've had 500 clients. And people don't realize that it takes time, it takes experience, and people want to be the best today. And it's like, great, I want you to be the best.
The patience thing is a big one. It's like, we see people, but like, let's go back to the other example of my friend JP. He went through my coaching course. He had less than 1,000. He's got like 30K now, and he deserves it, because like you said, he's funny, he's likable.
But see, Declan, I want to push back on that. Like, I don't know, JP, so this is not a personal attack on him, but does he deserve it? If he's like a new coach and he's just entered this space and he's just done an education course with you. Does he deserve, an audience that sees him as an authority? I don't know that anyone deserves that.
Well, I mean, I whether deserve is the right word, or maybe it's just like it happened for him and other people see that and they like, he never wanted to go viral. He was just doing the video that he felt comfortable with. And he comes from a gym floor background. And I actually, he deserves success. Whether we can assign a number to it, who knows? But I think that people see that and they go, oh, he blew up so quickly, I have to do it too. It wasn't his intention. I was like, dude, you need to start posting content. If you want to transition from a gym floor coach and a kinesiology degree to an online coach, there's got to be a gap. It has to be content. Let's do that. And it's gone really well for him. But they see that and they go, oh, I need to do that too. They don't know that he swapped degrees to do my course, changed his whole life around to do my thing with me, and took a big risk because he didn't know my course was good. Like that, he only went through the second intake of it, things like that where they're taking risks. And so, based on the risk that I know he took and the experience he has, I think he does deserve it. But it's a matter of patience when it comes to this stuff where everyone wants to do it overnight, which is a big problem. I've been coaching coming up on, I think, 5 or 6 years now, and it was powerlifting and it was gym floor and it was a degree and I've worked with people who can't even talk, got one leg, different, like I've done the whole thing. And it's like, and now I get to pick and choose. I'm going to work with people like me who want to train hard because that's my preference, right? But I feel like, you've been in the gym and doing this almost twice as long as me. I think that, if you're not willing to invest 5 years, you don't care about it enough. And you might say 10, and I'm obviously in it for the long run. But like, if your vision is, if you're a coach listening and your vision is, by next year, I'm going to be at 15K. I'm going to do 10K a month income. If you're going to do all that stuff and it's just like, I need to do that now, you're looking at it the wrong way, because realistically, because people like myself, Paul, everyone who does this stuff, that already exists. It's already way harder to do this now.
Yeah.
2 years ago, it would be, when I got into this sort of space online 2 years ago, it was a bit easier. Now it's done. You're not going to come up now in the space, or most likely not going to. You've got to figure out a different way, and it's going to be hard work and perseverance. And going back to the investment thing that you spoke about earlier, like I only spend my money on 2 things, and it's making sitting at my desk easier and more comfortable and more enjoyable so I can talk to clients all day. So a better monitor, nicer lights, a chair, a mic, whatever. Those maybe not needed as much. And education. And so as soon as one thing finishes up, I'm like, okay, who am I going to give my money to next? And whether or not you can throw around money doing that stuff, or you sort of have to really think about it, I think it's still the right decision. And I think the impatience and the I deserve mindset, I deserve these followers and these likes because I made this video, or like I've been coaching 2 clients for 6 months, and it's like, who's to say what we deserve as a coach?
I think there's too much worth and weight put on following, and some of the best coaches in the world have next to no following, right? I mean, everyone knows that, that. And I think that I don't know why, but the metric of success now is following. I know someone who's got, 150,000 followers, probably more, I haven't checked for a while, and he's struggling to make a business work. Like, he cannot get enough clients. And because he's very much just going for the viral type posts. And then there's people who I've mentored with, like they've mentored me because I believe these people to be some of the best coaches in the world. I mean, Stefan Cazol, do you know Stefan? So this is the problem, right? Like Stefan Cazol, he was the right-hand man for Poliquin. You're familiar with Charles, yeah?
Yeah.
So he headed up Charles's performance center. Stefan is the guy behind the undulating periodization model. Like he's largely why that is still a thing today. And there's a lot of things. Adam O'Mackie. Well, I mean, Adam does daily undulating. Yeah. So Stefan does like the classic undulating periodization, which will be intensification, accumulation. So accumulation 1, intensification 1, etc. Which again, I probably predated Poliquin. I'm not sure where that sort of started, but probably like I don't know, probably, I don't know, not Russia, I'm not sure where, but nonetheless, people like Stefan have been doing this for decades, like decades and decades, and have just coached thousands and thousands of high-end clients, athletes, like elite athletes, and people don't even know who this guy is. But I know coaches who've gone, mentored with him, and then built a business off what they've learned from him, right? And the point I wanted to make is he's got a very small following. Like for him, that's not where he's getting his business, right? Like people somehow know that he's the best and he's got a very
Word of
successful
mouth.
institute. Yeah, word of mouth or whatever it might be. And, you know, like maybe not nowadays. So you obviously haven't heard of him, but when I was coming up in the scene, everyone who was a good coach knew who this guy was, right? Like that. Obviously, we all know who Stefan Cazalt is, you know, like, I mean, Thibodeau, you're familiar with Christian Thibodeau, yeah? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would be that. I guess these names have changed. I'm feeling that just based on the looks you're giving me. It's like, okay,
Hey, I've heard of these people. I think it's honestly just, I mean, I'm 23. I just turned 23. It has to be an age thing, right?
It is an age thing. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I guess that's the point I'm making, where these guys used to be seen as the experts, and they are still experts, but they're not granted that expert status due to having hundreds of thousands of followers.
They don't know how to use CapCut. That's why. That's literally 100%. Why. They don't know how to.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And what I would say now is, people, you have a choice, and maybe I'm being cynical here, but I feel like you have a choice between being an educator or being a marketer or a content creator. And I think that, and maybe this is me just trying to make an excuse for myself, I don't know. But if I feel like, you know what, if I put the time I spend into learning, into editing, I could probably make some okay videos. But I don't have an extra 2, 4, 5 hours to spend on editing. I'm spending that time learning. And I don't see how it's possible that someone, and I know you've been spending a lot of time editing and maybe you can speak to this, but I don't see how it's possible that someone can be churning out by themselves high-end post-production, you know, high edited quality videos, and also spending, you know, 5 hours a day learning. Like that to me doesn't add up. So I think people are making a choice. Do I spend my time doing this skill or acquiring this skill? And
I can tell you exactly how it goes. I can speak to it now, because basically in the last few months, like my stuff has been better. Like the quality of the videos is better, right? So I'm at a point now where I've hired an editor. I don't do any of it anymore. It's all done. 2 or 3 videos a week, I pay for that. Like that's a luxury that I can afford now. But coming up, and even the last few months before I found the editor that I wanted, it was just like, you get up at 5:30, you edit, script, film, edit 2 hours, 7:30, and then you coach until bedtime, and then you go to bed.
So you're spending like 2 hours a day on
yeah, and it was the first 2 hours, get it out of the way, coach all day. Then I'd be like, have my call with Chris, do my learning for the week, and go to sleep. And that was it. And it was like Groundhog Day. Yeah. And then it's like, okay, well, now I'm in a spot where someone else can do the editing. And it's like, now I'm in a spot where I can, you know, organize my time better so that I have more time for learning. And so like, I think the thing you just mentioned, it's a good litmus test, is like, how often is this person pumping out content? How good is it? And then that might give you an edge, not even how good it is, just the frequency of it. So, okay, if we have time for this much, there is a gap somewhere that we should be filling with clients or education, right? So the current thing at the moment is make as many videos as you can and get as many views as you can, and then business starts flowing in. And I know accounts with hundreds of thousands of followers, like, you know, almost 500,000, who they ask business questions. They ask me business questions, and it's like, it's just because the views don't mean.
No, views do not equate to business, 100%. You could have an account with 5,000 followers, and they could have a far more successful business than someone with 500,000 followers or several 100,000 followers.
Yeah, well, the business mentor that I'm working with at the moment, they have probably a third of my followers, and I know for a fact they make more money than me. And so it's like, yeah, it's just how well you capitalize on the audience that you have, and not the total size. Obviously, size helps as well, you know, someone like Jeff Nippard, for example, but it is about like how you capitalize. And so I think that to summarize and answer those 2 questions, I think that people are going about it the wrong way, and we should go back to how we used to do it, which is you pay for education first, you figure out the business stuff second, but you're a coach first and a business person second.
Or the alternative would be, and I don't like it. I find business interesting, but I find it annoying. And to be honest, I've I guess I've been in a privileged position where I haven't had to go out of my way to find business because I have been sort of booked out for most of my business life. But I kind of prefer to make myself a little bit inaccessible. So I kind of want people to have to put in effort to work with me. So generally, like, I would never do a sales call with anyone. I would never, like, if someone says, can I have a link to sign up? I'd be like, yeah, it's on my page. I'm not going to give them the link. I want someone to have to take the extra 1 or 2 steps to work with me because it shows me at least you're committed, right? And so maybe that is a place of privilege. I'm not necessarily saying everyone needs to do it my way. But if someone was saying, okay, well, I can't afford to pay bills, I do need to work my business, what I'd say in that situation is don't give up the education. Have 2 education streams. So have one person who's mentoring you on physiology, on coaching, on whatever, on how to deliver the best service, like actually the service itself, how to make that as good as possible for the client. And then have a second mentor who's a business mentor. And that sounds like what you kind of do anyway. And, it doesn't mean you need to wait and say, okay, I'll do the business stuff later. I get that if you don't have a business, you can't afford education, but don't just do the business stuff. You still need to have a good service.
The thing is like all of this shit is free. Hormozi's podcast is free. It got me from, I won't say the numbers, but like you can go off Hormozi's podcast to a more than you could imagine. Like, and that's free on Spotify and YouTube. And education, a lot of it is free. Your groups are not expensive. You can get into Chris's Patreon. It's not expensive. If you, instead of like scrolling reels and being an idiot, if you literally had a notes app open on your computer and you went through your page, my page, everyone else's page, and you took notes, you could then look back and have a coaching system instead of just going, oh, this thing, and then next week I see a reel on this next thing. Oh, I'm going to do that thing now. It's like, why don't you write it down? It's all free. It's all there for you. You're going to use a bit of critical thinking to, oh, Jake said this, but Declan said this, but then I can see how you could do both, like the differences in our sets or exercises or whatever. And then you put it together and, do that for a couple months on a bunch of different pages, like pick 10 pages, give yourself 6 months, have a notes app, have it categorized, go through, take notes on every reel, look in the comments, see what you've said in the comments to give more context or whatever. That's free. If you're working a job, you can do that in your spare time. Then you'll have a whole system that you know how to use. Then maybe you can make content and, use it with your clients or go through and do the same thing on the business side of things. Take notes on Hormozi's framework. You can ask ChatGPT to give you the framework. Like there's so many different ways to do all this stuff for free to the point where I can't afford it. I can't afford to learn how to be a coach. It's not even a good excuse because I know your WhatsApp group isn't expensive. I know there are all these different things you can do for free or for very, very little. Just work your normal job and invest like, I don't know, $10 a week into $20 a week into a couple Patreon things and a group, and then do the rest for free. And you'll figure it out down the line. I think the money thing is like, I get objections sometimes with, my course or whatever. It's like someone the other day is like, oh, can you sell that to me? I was like, no. I was like, mate, like I'm not in a position that I need to, I've never done a sales call, even when I should have back in the day. But I'm like, I'm not in a position where I need to sell anything to you. If you want to work with, like, you're already a person I don't want to work with because you need convincing. We had to put our prices up. I had to make it more exclusive. The onboarding process is harder to get through now. It's more expensive because it can be. And I don't want to work with people who wouldn't get through that process. So it's just like it's like a positive feedback loop for me where it's like, I get paid more to do my job and the people I work with are awesome. And it's like, why would I not do that? I'm not going to sell you anything.
The only sales calls I've ever done are anti-sales calls. So I've only done a few of these where what I'll do is I'll do an initial consult with someone. And usually I do this when I'm booked out and I don't want another client. And so what I'll do is I'll be like, okay, this is all the issues I see. Usually I'm working with blood work or whatever. And then I say, this is exactly what I'm going to do with you. And I lay out, this is what we would do in phase 1. This is what phase 2 would look like. These are the supplements we would use. This is why. This is the training we would do. And it's normally a 2-hour call. And at the end of it, I say, you can either do it with me, and I'm going to do exactly what I just outlined there, or you've got the plan now and you can go and run and do it by yourself. And every single time I've tried to get myself out of a sale, and every single time the person's been like, I want to do it with you. Okay.
Yeah, at that point, it's like, the thing is, it's like, I got to that point where I was like, I like the clients I work with. I'm not going to kick out old clients on lower prices because I really like them. And they might even be, some of them might even be listening. I'm not going to get rid of them, even though I could have someone come in and pay double that price or more.
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm still, I'm trying to increase my business and whatnot. We all are in some way, but I'm still a coach first. And, I literally I had to put it up to stop. And then I wanted to hire my coach, Alan, who's now a part of Hypertrophy Academy. That was something I've wanted to do for a long time. And now people can go to him instead. And so I think the tricky part is when you do get full like yourself, the skills that you have, especially on the health side, it would take so long to train someone up for you to feel comfortable, for them to represent your business. It would just be impossible. And so with Alan, because he's my coach, I know exactly how the service runs. I trust him implicitly. He's a physical therapy student in America. He's very smart, smarter than me, way smarter than me, taught me a lot of stuff. And I hired him. I was like, dude, we're not doing any training. We catch up on a call sometimes, and I trust him 100%. And I got super, super lucky where the business can keep growing. He's happy, I'm happy, and we can take more clients and help more people, which is awesome. But for example, on that health side, if you're going to do a 2-hour call to go through someone's blood work, you can't just teach that to someone in even a year. Like that's a lifetime.
Several. I've got maybe 4 or 5 mentoring clients who I've mentored now for about 6 or 7 years straight. And it's at a point now where there's a few people I can refer people to. I don't feel the need to grow my business that much more. I don't want to take on people working for me. I'm happy to refer people out. But that's years of mentoring, and on the flip side, I get people who will mentor with me for 12 weeks or 10 weeks or whatever, and then suddenly jump out and publicize on their social media that they're now a blood work expert and they're a muscle physiology expert and whatever. And literally I just sort of shake my head like it is what it is. But these were young dudes who, they've been coaching for a year. They've done 8 weeks trying to learn blood chemistry with me. And then suddenly they're charging double what I charge, and they're classing themselves as a specialist. And it's like, bro, spend some time in the trenches, actually learn to help people first. Like the goal here is not just to tick, I've done this, I've mentored with this person, I can now put in my bio. Like the goal is, I think it should be to deliver the best service possible to clients. Like whether it's in the fitness space or the health space, you actually have an opportunity to change someone's life, like full on change someone's life. Like don't forget why you got into this in the first place. And hopefully for most people, they got into it because they did either A, they were passionate, they had good results themselves, or they actually care about changing people's lives.
I didn't even know how much money that you could make in fitness when I started, which is how I know that I was never in it for the money, because I had no idea that just the ridiculous amount, like copious, more than you need in fitness. And yeah, and people now know that stuff because there are people who are open about it. Like there are, coaches who are like, 10, 20 a month, whatever the number is, like 30, 40, even some of these like coaches, I know you've seen them, where it's like, we help, like I help fitness coaches scale to a fucking, and it's like, dude, please get a job. But like,
well, that's the lifespan of a coach, isn't it? Like you start off coaching and then you become an online sort of group, have a big sort of scalable business, and then you become like a coach for coaches, and then you become a business coach.
It's funny because I even put up my post recently, and it was like something about being an online coach, and it was like, here are the things that like you should do. Like there's always time for like you can never spend enough on education. There's always time to make some content, put out some information. The last one was climb the evidence ladder, which is do it yourself, get a client to do it, and then teach someone else to get their clients to do it. So get jacked, get your clients jacked, and then run a WhatsApp education group where you help other coaches get their clients jacked. And I don't see it being, let's take, say, Joe Bennett, for example, big inspiration of mine. I'm going to do his course, and I was going to actually fly to America to do one of his seminars, but it didn't work. And he got jacked and competed in bodybuilding, and he works with all the best lifters around the world, Terrence, everyone like that. And he runs education. And to me, that's the end goal. Like that's where I want to go with this, where I'm just working with sort of picking and choosing in a private studio and doing big education stuff. And that's my end goal. I don't know if I've ever spoken about that, but everyone wants to skip the first 2 steps and go to step 3, which is like educating TikTok lifters about fucking internal movement arts and stuff. And I honestly think we could go on about it forever, because I think we have slightly different like experiences, but come back to the same thing where it's like, we got there differently, but in the same kind of way, albeit, you've done it for longer. There were actually some fun topics in here that weren't us, rambling about our grievances in the industry. This stuff will be a lot easier to get through. So I'm going to throw you under the bus here and ask you what you think about the whole Lat debate that's going on at the moment. I have an opinion, but I would love to hear yours.
I was actually going to say to you, hey, we should talk about something we disagree on, and it'd be interesting to model a way that people can actually disagree on something and end up, sort of hopefully not hating the other person. So
we could start with, I don't think we're going to disagree on lats. I don't think we're going to disagree, but we could start with the more exercises, less sets thing, because we don't even disagree. We just do it differently if you want to.
Yeah. We should find something like the thing we disagree on most. That'd be interesting. I don't know what it is though.
We'll get there.
So more exercises. Okay, should we like do this where it's like a debate and like I make my point, you make yours, or should we do it where we just sort of more generally explain why we do it?
Well, I think that you have a really good way of articulating why we would do more single set exercises. Even though, for example, I made that joke video the other day. It was like, you tell a TikToker you don't do 30 exercises. Like, I understand that, which is why I think it's funny to make a joke, because I get it. But I think that you have a nice way of articulating it. So why would I do?
So I'm gonna try to convince you. Okay, I'm gonna try to convince you to do it my way. So everyone listening, I assume, certainly you know that we have a diminishing returns as far as set volume goes. So each additional set is less stimulating than the set before it. Okay, on a like per muscle basis. Now, if we work off Schoenfeld's meta-analysis or meta-regression, whatever it was, we see that seems to be about half as stimulating as the set before it. Yeah. Obviously, newer data suggesting maybe it's a little bit more stimulating than that, but either way, there's diminishing returns. So simply, if you do, and this is why people have incorrectly said, well, you just do one set, because the second set is not providing as much stimulus as the first set. Yeah. So obviously, they've over-extrapolated that a little bit too far. So we can agree on that. Yeah. And then we can also agree, and the outcome of this we might differ on, but we can agree that ultimately hypertrophy is occurring at a muscle fiber level, right? Mm-hmm. So if we now know that each additional set is less stimulating than the set before it, and we know that ultimately hypertrophy is always muscle fiber specific, the magnitude of difference in muscle fiber or motor unit recruitment, like sure, we can argue over that, but we do know that it is still muscle fiber specific. Then the third point to make is, well, is there a cap to within session volume? And if there is, somewhere there is, obviously no one's going to be doing 100 sets a session. So if we know that there is ultimately a cap somewhere, then we can agree that there's a limited amount of volume you can do within a single session. So with each of those being true, that each additional set is less stimulating, hypertrophy is muscle fiber specific, and we have a limit to how much volume we can do in a single session, then for as long as we have the possibility of doing different exercises that adequately stimulate different motor units, it would make sense to do that over repeating an exercise with additional sets that is training the exact same motor units, right? Mm-hmm. So if, let's say we're doing full body as an example, if I can conceive of 20 different exercises that have significant enough difference in motor unit recruitment, does it not make sense for me to do 20 exercises for one set each than to do 10 exercises for 2 sets each, and therefore have slightly fewer motor unit recruitment variance?
No, I that's the thing. I completely agree with the reasoning and the logic. I 100% agree with your physiology, and even in saying that, you definitely understand it better than me. My thing is always just practicality and sustainability. And I know you know that, because we've had this conversation before where I'm just like, look, I completely understand that rationale. Like I actually in my last block did a pull down and a single arm lat row. Oh my God, everybody, I tried it. And I did both. And I don't know if progress was any faster. I'm coming out of a shoulder dislocation, but like, at the end of that block, I was like, it's really fucking annoying to do a single arm row and then also go to a lat pull down. Like, I'm the sort of person where I'm like, I need to get back to work. Like, I'm like if I had unlimited, let's put it this way, if I had more time, I would 100%, because I completely agree with the physiology, I would 100% do what you're doing. Definitely. I would do 10 maybe exercises in an upper session, or I don't know, a bit more maybe, and certainly would increase the length of my lower sessions and maybe I do one set of seated hamstring and also do like a back extension and make sure I got both, but just time wise I don't. So if
So
I get
here's my counter argument to that then. So let's say you're doing an upper session, you're doing shoulder work, and you're doing, okay, let's say you're doing one exercise for shoulders and you're doing overhead press. You're doing a Smith machine overhead press and you're doing 2 to 4 sets, whatever. Well, okay, so you can sit there and you can do your 2 to 4 sets and you can wait, 2 or 3 minutes between each set. But you could also set up this Smith machine. You can do one set behind the neck. You can do one sagittal press. You can then drop it down and do one upright row, all with the same weight, change the height between the set, and probably spend no additional time doing that.
Yeah, I mean that's obviously then we are assuming that we have access to good enough equipment where you could change it around and have it work. I mean, Smith machine's a great example because it's super versatile. But like, I know I go to a gym, for example, where I could do something like that. I have clients that go to gyms there's this gym in America that has like 300 pieces of equipment. They've blown up on social media. They have like 80 back pieces, whatever. That client, I can have a bit more fun with that guy. And I do go a bit more into okay, we're going to do one set of incline here, one set of flat here. Then we're going to do like, and I push it a bit longer because it's like he cares. And I know the equipment he has access to is so good that the differences are enough. So like a good example for this debate would be like, I don't have a good incline press. I have a good flat press, but the incline press may as well be a flat press based on arm path. So it's like, yeah, I could go and do it, but is it different enough that it's worth
different? Yeah.
And the other thing I have is then, and this is not even to toot my own horn, I know you're strong as well. It's like sometimes it takes a long time to warm up for this stuff. And not even a long time that like I have to rest longer or anything, but like there's like 4 or 5 plates that has to go on something, or whatever it might be. And so sometimes even then just like loading something up is annoying, and it's like but I see a point. Like for the record, I don't have anything that has 4 sets, but I don't even know if I have 3 sets on anything, to be honest. I think everything is at 2, but you could definitely do one and then
even 2, if you're doing a lat pull down, okay, do a pronated lat pull down and then do a neutral grip lat pull down. You could probably use the same load. Like what I try to program a lot of the time would be variants where someone can stay in the same station and they can even use the same load. And it might be that one of those exercises, they get 6 repetitions out and the other one, they get 10 out. I don't really care that much, right? We're doing a single set. I don't care if you do 10, 12 reps, whatever. So that's the way I'm programming a lot of the time, where if you have dumbbells, if you have a Smith machine, if you have a cable machine, a lat pull down, often you can do 2, 3, 4 different exercises in that one station without taking really any longer.
Can I have another example, say like a cable example? Oh, a cable's too easy. What about like dumbbells?
Yeah, I mean, so obviously then people are going to argue, oh, well, what about stability? And that's a whole separate question, right? But, for me, like I wouldn't be, and maybe for you as well, I think for me, the way I look at it with dumbbells is if someone has spent a long time doing dumbbell and barbell exercises, I'm more than happy to give them dumbbell and barbell exercises.
The stability argument is so funny. The coordination thing, there was a post that was like, recently it was like, barbell movements aren't training strength, they're training a skill. It's like, come on, like
at a certain point, if you're a total beginner, I agree with you. Yeah, for like 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, you probably are. I mean, again, you were in the gym, you probably had Gen Pop clients walk in day one, you put an empty bar in the hands, and it's just wobbly McGee. They don't know what to do with it, right? So I understand at a certain point you are just developing that skill. But if someone has been lifting for years, you can't tell me that they don't have the stability and coordination to overhead press a dumbbell, right? So in that instance, I'm not concerned about it. So for me, I absolutely would not be opposed to doing, say, dumbbells. I'm doing an overhead press with dumbbells. I always start with the lighter exercise, right? And it's going to help you warm up for the heavy exercise too. So I might do overhead press dumbbells. I might drop the incline a little bit, and then I'll do incline press with dumbbells. Might drop it further, do flat with dumbbells, and then I might do, say, bent over one arm dumbbell row there for back. And if I'm not, I don't always do all my back exercises back to back or all my chest. Like sometimes I might just do that station. So then I might do, say, arms there. I might do alternating dumbbell curls. That's probably all I would do there. But in that, or maybe I'll do lateral raises as well. So in that one station, I'll get all my chest work done. You could chuck in flyers if you want it, but I'll get all my chest work done. I'll get all my shoulder work done. I'll get some of my back work done. And most of that will just be with the same dumbbells. Maybe I'll go heavier for flat bench, but a lot of the time, if I'm doing overhead, incline, I can just use the same load for those. All you're doing is just dropping the incline down.
I mean, that makes total sense because you could go through Y raise, lateral raise, overhead, incline, flat, row, Kelso shrug, and then, I don't know, whatever, bicep curls and like overhead extensions. And I guess the only thing you're missing there is, no, you could do everything. And so
you could do reverse curl as well with a dumbbell.
Yeah, literally everything. And then I guess the considerations are obviously then just like you're lucky enough to have a home gym, or lucky's maybe the wrong word, but that's, that's a huge benefit of having your own equipment. And maybe in a commercial gym, someone may not feel comfortable doing that. But I completely agree that like now that you say it is like maybe the time element is is not as good as an argument as I thought maybe it was when I said it. I think that the big thing, and honestly, the two reasons, not time, because we just disqualified that. I almost said it again. For me, it's just enjoyment. And that is really the only difference. Like I was doing the single arm row and then the pull down, and I was like, if these are similar enough that like I'm not going to look much different at the end of this year, maybe, yeah, then it's not worth it. Because then I was sort of going into sessions going, oh, I've got to go through like all these different stations and like these, and I was like, oh, this is not as fun. And at the end of the day, like I'm not ever going to get on stage. It's just for fun. Like I just do this for fun because I love it. And so if I'm not enjoying my workouts, then,
Well, I think that's the best argument. Like ultimately, I think that's the argument everyone should be coming back to. I think like we established, a time one probably not really doesn't hold up that well. And then physiologically, I think it's hard to argue that more variation isn't going to be better. I don't know how you could really make the best argument I could see to oppose that would be, but does it matter enough? Yeah. Okay, we can argue about that. Maybe it doesn't. But but what if it does? It's very hard to argue, but this other way is better. I can't see how you could argue that, right? But to your point, if your motivation is lower, if your enjoyment is low, like, why are you in the gym? Like you just said, you're in the gym because you enjoy doing this. Why would you make yourself do something that you fundamentally enjoy less?
Yeah, and that's totally it. And like most of for whatever reason, most of my clients are like, I want my sessions to be like an hour, and I this is my previous split. I like doing upper lower, and I even suggest, hey man, if we want, we could do more exercises, and it might be a slightly better result in a year's time. You might have an extra half inch or whatever on whatever muscle, theoretically. And most of the time we give it a go, and they're like, actually, I don't want to do that, and that would totally be selection bias because people buy into my training based on the way they see me training. So 100% selection bias. And you probably have people go, yeah, I definitely want to do it with 20 exercises.
Well, about half of my one-on-one clients, I don't take new one-on-one clients. So they've been with me for a very long time. So maybe that's skewed it a little bit, but about half of them, I tend to use fewer exercises, more sets. And then the other half, they enjoy doing more variation. Back in the day when I used to work at Clean Health, we used to do, initially it was a Braverman assessment. You probably haven't heard of Eric Braverman. He was a psychologist. This was a really big Charles Poliquin thing. So we would do this sort of personality test with our clients. And the idea would be that it would, pseudoscience would analyze whether they were dopamine or GABA or acetylcholine or serotonin sort of dominant or deficient. And then later on, that evolved into Thibodeau started using his personality typing, which was, I forget what he had different categories for them, but essentially it was a very similar kind of metric. And what we used to use that for, apart from trying to work out if someone's dopamine deficient, and what I got out of it was actually what kind of training is this person likely to respond well to? And, if you have someone who back in the day we would identify as GABA, but these would be the type of people who they don't normally get in the gym. These are the people who are doing yoga and who are outdoors, hiking and stuff like that. And if you happen to get one of them in the gym, they probably don't want this sort of mental stimulation of doing 20 different things. These are the type that are happy to do German volume training and do 10 sets of the same thing in submaximal load and just repeat something until they get it perfect. And if I get a client who's like that, whose personality type is just, they're a bit of a perfectionist, they're not really that outgoing, they don't love a lot of change, I'm not going to get them to do 20 different exercises in one workout. They're going to hate that. And they're actually going to perform pretty poorly at it, you know?
Mm.
So, like you're saying, it does come down to what works for that individual. My challenge to you, Declan, would be for stuff that you don't hate. So, say you're doing a stiff leg deadlift, like a variant I love of that is one set stiff leg deadlift, one set RDL, just use the same load, right?
Mm.
Like identify in your own programming where is there an exercise which is feasibly similar enough that you could just do a slight variant in that exact same station, a variant that you don't dislike that exercise, you can keep the load the same, do a set of each, and just, just for a few different exercises, just see what you think of it.
Mm. I mean, I need to add a hinge back in because we moved to a new gym and the 45 it just doesn't, has some 45 they do not work.
Yeah.
Most of them suck. The angle, there's shit in the way of your hands. You can't.
And you just can't load it. And a lot of the gyms place them like away from barbells.
Yep.
And it's like, oh, great, I can load with a kettlebell. It goes up to like 22 kilos. Like, what is the point of this?
Yeah, so I have to put a hinge back in, and traditionally being taller and in the past not having the best pelvic control, like I'd sort of light up my lower back, and so we moved away from SLDLs because I sort of just got frustrated with them and couldn't keep my ego in check with the load and stuff. But I also need to start training glutes again and a hinge movement for hamstrings. So maybe that's a good combination to sort of get my leg extensions out of the way because they're the focus, and then do a set of stiff legs, do a set of glutes, and then go do some lying curls and adduction and calves and go home. And I think that's definitely a good way of looking at it, is like, how can I make this like this, maybe it's not the perfect way. Maybe set of stiff legs and one set of RDLs after isn't the perfect way to do it, but maybe it gets me really, really close. It's enjoyable and I can then move on. And I think that one thing that people don't, when you can always tell someone doesn't coach a lot of people in the way they present ideas, because it's always very closed-minded, and they wouldn't feel comfortable doing that if they had a lot of clients, because their clients would see that and be like, well, that's not how we do it. Or, wow, like maybe he's talking about me, like maybe coach is making a post about the way I wanted to do it. Like, you can just weed them out because they wouldn't use that language. Because if I made an inflammatory post and I used a question that someone had asked me or a method that someone had suggested, the client would know that it was them, or they would go, why is coach acting like that when we don't do it like that, or this or that? And it's like
100%. Yeah. I would never talk about my client experience. Even transformations. I made a decision years ago. I'm never going to post the transformations. If they post it, okay, I'll share it. But I didn't care if someone signed a waiver, anything like that. Like, that's their story. It's got nothing to do with me using it for marketing. Like, like you're saying, why would you throw your client under the bus just to try to drum up a little bit more engagement? Or yeah.
I mean, look, I've definitely had more applications when I've sort of in periods where I've reposted client stuff, and I don't know if people care that much about it anyway, which is why you would rarely see me repost client stuff unless it's powerlifting, because that's a bit more fun. You're looking at like it's not subjective, right? It's objective, and I like those reposts. But yeah, people don't really care as much about that stuff anymore, which is why I said earlier, like, just tell a story and be have a personality and have a personality, educate, entertain, and you're all good, or some combination, or two of those. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that they wanted us to talk about was one thing we've changed our mind on recently. And I have mine. I can start with it if you can't think of one, or I'm happy to let you go first.
Yeah, you start and let's see if that sparks anything.
I about 6 months ago went down this idea of like maximizing, and I went through all the resources, and at the time I was writing my coaching course. So for anyone who isn't familiar, A Coach's Guide to Maximizing Hypertrophy is not like a business thing. It is literally just, here is everything I know and believe about coaching. Here's how you can do it in so many different ways. And I was selling it to people who were coaches and who wanted to become coaches. And at the time I was sort of in this mindset of like, everything matters so much. And in the last, what are we in May? In the last, 6 or 9 months since I wrote it, I've sort of almost gone back in the opposite direction, where I'm like, if we don't nail all of these other things first, like, why are we worried about internal moment arms when we don't even get multiple servings of fruit and veg? Like, I understand that's like a reductionist way of looking at it, because obviously you can do both and you don't have, you know what I mean? Like, you can worry about internal moment arms and then also start getting your fruit and veg in. But are we really focusing on the right things here? And is
Majoring
my
the minors.
are we majoring in that? Like, I see myself to have some sort of responsibility. There are things that I learnt with Chris that I haven't said or spoken about and won't post about, because I think it would actually be a net negative for people to hear, because they won't understand it well enough, because I don't think I could articulate it well enough anyway. But then they would also, it'd be like Chinese whispers, and then everyone would hear something different, and then we'd have this new idea. And it's only one or two things that I won't speak about, because I think I have some responsibility to, like, I made this joke the other day. It's like the Batman joke about, like, not the hero they wanted, the one they deserved. And it was like, what they want is all this information. What the audience wants is all these new ideas and what's the best way to do everything. What they need is to be told that, look, if you don't do this stuff for 5-10 years in a row consistently and have, like, everything else nailed, it doesn't matter. I promise there is no difference between your approach to single sets and my approach to less exercises if you're not also just, like, sleeping and eating well and just, like, training hard. And, like, I've sort of moved back in that direction where I'm like, look, I'm happy to give you this stuff, this, like, more nuanced, like, I'll talk about this, but I'm sort of more often now reminding people, look, this is cool and I'm happy to help you understand it, but let's sort of go over here and look, like, you know, people are worried, like, oh God, I mean, why would I do upper lower when I could just train less and have less fatigue and do full body? And it's like, are we really, 18, 19 years old with 2 years experience? Are we actually talking about the difference between upper lower and full body and fatigue and that sort of thing? And, like, my coach, Alan, he made a joke. Obviously, Alan works with me now. He made a joke. Oh, I trained 6 times last week, so I'm not going to make any gains. His problem is he's never satisfied with his own effort. And so he always goes over and above. And we've had this conversation where he's like, I know when I do that 6th session, it's probably not the best idea, but he's, like, the hardest working person in the gym that I have ever known. And it's like, he could worry about that stuff if he wanted to, because I think he's earned the right. He's extremely jacked and strong. And it's like, he knows how this stuff works and very smart. And I think that, like, that's sort of why maybe people have sort of noticed my content shifting, where it's like, this is, there's already enough of this really nuanced, specific stuff. For example, you do an awesome job of it, making it super simple. I don't need to do it again. Most of my followers know you. So what's the point in me doing it? I think that then if my content can sort of serve as a reminder, hey, look, this stuff that Jake's posting about is awesome and it definitely matters and it can be very, very helpful. But you might also need a reminder that, like, if you've not even trained for 5 years, like, it probably doesn't, like, sure, if it doesn't affect you negatively at all to do, and you can do all these different exercises, you can worry about, like, resistance profiles, and it doesn't negatively affect your motivation, the time it takes, the set, like, if it's not having a negative effect and being outweighed by that negative effect, go for it, do it. I know people who care about that stuff and are new and could definitely handle it. But I also know someone who's trained for a long time, and I know that he would, like, he'd be so negatively affected by trying to maximize everything that it'd have the opposite effect. And so I've sort of changed my mind on, like, more so the way I speak about things, where it's like, I can help you understand maybe how neuromechanical matching might apply to this situation, but just remember, like, this is only a piece of the puzzle, and you should also be putting a lot of effort into, am I at least eating it at the right time before the gym? And do I have, like, a constant, like, bedtime? And not that you can't do both of those things, but it's just like, there are so many parts of it. If we only focus on, like, Chris's Patreon and we're not worried about anything else, we're missing out. And so that's sort of the leaf that I've sort of turned recently. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it definitely makes sense. I think that's the space. If someone's a new coach, and I'm not calling you a new coach, I'm just saying if someone is a new coach, what they should be doing is providing information that helps the masses and helps the people they're likely to be working with. And that's the kind of information that's going to help people, right? Like, that's going to be applicable to 90+% of people, and it's going to help 90+% of people get far better results than what they're getting now. And instead, what's happening is people are jumping to that, 5-10% of information that most people don't need to be worrying about. And most people who are teaching it don't understand it anyway, and they're doing it to try to stand out. Yeah. And so I think what you've made there is a really good point that, hey, this is the stuff. Like the other stuff doesn't matter if you're not doing this stuff, right? And, you know, anyone who's been in the game for long enough, like they all cut their teeth doing, you know, hard work in the gym, like, you know, probably sets to failure, training too much. Like we all did that. I mean, God, the amount of sessions I would literally vomit in, like we've all been there and done that, right? And we didn't start by doing, you know, the stuff you've been sharing where people are saying, oh, do 2 reps and reps in reserve in 1 set, like whatever. Like, no, you guys need to learn what it means to actually train hard. You need to learn what failure even is. You need to learn, like, you know, I saw, I forget if it was the guy that we were talking about before or someone else, but someone shared one of their evidence-based, science-based posts, and the guy was saying that going to the gym is as easy as making his bed in the morning. And it's like, well, hold up, like that's not a science-based take. Going to the gym shouldn't be.
How hard's making your bed?
Like you actually do need to learn how to train hard.
Yeah.
So I think what you're saying, 100% spot on. I couldn't agree more. Yeah, totally. Like maybe I don't know, maybe he's got a massive bed and he's making it differently to how I make mine. I don't know. But so I think partly we need to learn, who are we speaking to? Yeah. And you're probably speaking to different people I'm speaking to. And sure, we've got a lot of crossover in our audience, but why because obviously, like you mentioned, I've got another page. My health page is sort of my main stuff anyway. I started the fitness page because when I started, I felt like there wasn't good nuance information out there. And, you know, after working with Chris for a very long time, I was sort of pretty disillusioned with what I thought was poor muscle physiology content that was being shared online. And so I started the page not as anything to do with business, but purely because I was disappointed at the low quality content that I was seeing. And since I started my page, that's 180. And now the dominant narrative is just people trying to major in the minors and just this very specific, you know, like you're saying, moment arms, neuromechanical matching, this kind of data that doesn't help most people. Most people can't understand pendulum stuff well enough for it to be practical.
And so it's going to swing back.
Yeah. And it started to swing back. And that's why we're seeing the anti-science based tribe emerge. So we get all that. But that also doesn't mean we throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, well, therefore, this nuanced stuff doesn't matter for anyone, because it does. Like there are people out there who it doesn't matter for. And I do think that information should be shared, and there are people who can use it responsibly. So, you know, I think we it's a body analogy. You know, we all have a different part to play in the body, and you know, one person's part might be just sharing fundamentals. Another person's part might be sharing very high-end nuanced stuff that just applies to top-end coaches who can then disseminate that in an applicable way. So, yeah, I agree completely with what you're saying. Something I've changed my mind on is, this is a bit more specific, and maybe it's majoring into minors like you just critiqued, but I used to be, so my training style has changed massively. Like I grew up in the Poliquin era. So, you know, I was doing German volume training, 10 sets of 10, Gironda, 8 sets of 8, you know, some of this stuff, which even at the time, like I knew I was overdoing it, right? But like I got into the gym because I just really enjoyed pushing myself, and I enjoyed the feeling of vomiting in a session. And like that, I was a volume guy. Like I loved high volume, and I know that it held me back. And I know that I wasn't getting stronger for many years because of it. And I know that I got injured because of it. But I just thought, A, that's what you do, and B, I kind of enjoyed the feeling. And so to be critiqued now online is like, oh, you're just a low volume guy. It's like, hang on, I don't want to be the low volume guy. I want to be the highest volume I can get away with guy, because I enjoy it. So that's just, I always have a little bit of a chuckle when people say, I just don't want to work hard, I just want to do low volume. But back in the day, I was very much on, why would you use machines? Yeah, barbells, dumbbells, like, you know, work your stabilizers. Obviously, that was a narrative back then. Transferability. I don't know if you've heard this, and there's some truth to it. So Poliquin, I think, was the guy who popularized this idea that there's a hierarchy of transfer. And so if you get stronger on an unstable exercise, barbell, dumbbell, you're going to get stronger on a more stable, like a cable. And if you get stronger on a cable, you'll get stronger on, say, a machine. But if you get stronger on a machine, it won't transfer to the cable, which won't transfer to the barbell dumbbell. And there is some truth to that, right? So that was applied very significantly in sort of the method of training that I grew up in, where we would say, well, therefore, basically, don't ever use machines. So that was my upbringing. And then over the last few years, I saw a 180 to, well, hang on, machines add so much more stability. They allow us to, isolate particular regions of a muscle we wouldn't be able to otherwise. We can, reduce the amount of central motor command that's being dispersed elsewhere. Machines, easier to set up. They just make sense. I got to a point where I almost, not fully, but like 80% eliminated dumbbell and barbell work. And I was, 80, 90% just using machines. And I've come back now into the middle where I think actually, I do think as a natural lifter, I think if someone's enhanced, it doesn't quite matter as much. But I think natural lifters, I honestly think the combination of both is more effective. And why that is, and I might be wrong here, but I don't know if you're familiar with that study. I think it was last year it was published where they had beginners, total noobs, never been in the gym. And they had them follow, they were training one particular muscle. I forget which muscle, but it was just one muscle, I don't know, 8 weeks, how long the study was. And they had one group that were like eating just a normal diet, another group that was eating high protein. And they looked at muscle gain, but they also looked at atrophy. And what they found was by having noobs who hadn't done any exercise before, so obviously we maintain normal amounts of muscle based on the activity we do, right? So if you've got somebody who's never been in the gym, they're not just atrophying and getting smaller every single week because their day-to-day stimulus is enough to maintain the muscle that they hold normally, right? Mm-hmm. So they had people who are adding more exercise and other muscles that weren't being trained directly atrophied. That's mental because they were still doing the normal day-to-day activity, right? Now, those who are eating more protein, I believe there was a slight mitigation, but they were still seeing atrophy occur. And the conclusion, this is in news, but the conclusion was there was essentially this shifting, this prioritizing of resources where they were taking resources away from some muscles and prioritizing towards muscles that were being trained. And like I said, those who are eating more protein or those who are eating, I think even just more calories, there was a mitigation of that. So what I've done with that is I've extrapolated, and again, I could be wrong here, but I've extrapolated that if I've got a natural lifter, especially a natural lifter who's in a cut, it's possible that their normal activity is not necessarily going to maintain their general muscle mass. And so that's where I look at something like a barbell exercise, let's say a squat or some kind of hinge, just stiff leg deadlift, rack pull, whatever. I would say, what are the lifts so we can lift as much load with, have as much dispersion of stimulus as possible? And they may not be the best quad builder, okay? I might not use a squat necessarily to build the quads, but if I can get you lifting a heavy load and, your back is isometrically engaged, your erectors are being used, maybe we're going to mitigate any loss or maybe even provide enough stimulus to see growth in some of these small muscles we're not directly targeting just with machine work. So that's probably this sort of swing I've done over the last year and a half, where I've gone back to saying, you know what, those exercises that the science-based lifters are shitting on, like I do a lot of heavy, like knee height, stiff leg rack pulls. And people are like, why the hell would you do that? Why would you do any barbell hinge? And it's like, okay, I understand it's not the best hamstring. I mean, it's actually pretty good hamstring exercise, but I understand it's not the best at anything. But I think the fact that it's not the best at any one thing, that's why actually a natural lifter should be using it.
Mm. Yeah, I think that like the whole idea that like stabilizer muscles don't exist, it's obviously it's muscles, they either contract or they change length or they isometrically contract, right? Obviously the muscles that are generally referred to as being stabilizer muscles, you're looking usually like TFL, glute med, rotator cuff, generally stabilizer muscles, right? If you will. They do, like, they're important muscles. And if we're only ever doing highly stable exercises where we never challenge them, like say at end range, they never have to contract fast, they never have to provide any like stability, if you will, you might run into issues where like doing a lunge variation where glute med is doing something, TFL is doing something to help you move, that might have been a better option, even if it was less stable, because now our hips just function better. We have better, say, stability, say hip extension. We can actually extend our hips properly. Like there is a complex biomechanical relationship between the entire body, and like the idea that we should only ever do, like this very strict range of motion, stable machine exercise. It's like, yeah, you can make the argument that you can take it too far, and barbell rows maybe are slightly higher, more dangerous than say like a T-bar or whatever. Yes, you could go too far, but like there's always some merit in. Are you familiar? You'd be familiar with Tom Haviland, right?
No, I'm not.
So he's got like 1 million followers. If you people listening probably might know him. If you have a look after, he's just like an ox. He is just like he's Australian dude. He's like, I'm pretty sure he's like 6'5". He's like two of us. Absolutely enormous, does like the craziest lifts, like Zercher carries farmer, like just the whole like training in the backyard with some metal type thing. You can't tell me, there's no one that will convince me if we were to put him on a machine, he would just thrive, right? Because he's already done all that other stuff. He can move in so many different ways. He has such good coordination, stability. Every muscle down to the, the thumb flexors or whatever is so strong that it just carries over so easily. And if we never do any of this, say, bro stuff, the stuff that you're saying you do some of, I do a little bit of it too, if we never do any of that stuff, we might just miss out on qualities. And a really easy example is powerlifters, where they really strictly abide by like, well, I'm not going to do that in my main lifts, so why would I ever do it outside my main lifts, move to the side, in the frontal plane, whatever. Then they end up getting hurt. It's like, hey, maybe we should like do some like side bends, and maybe we should also rotate and like maybe even move a little bit faster, do some like, whatever. And there's just, obviously pain and injury is very complex. And as you know, it can be tricky to deal with. There's no evidence to say that this stuff reduces injury, but like if I had to put my money on the line, I would say that like having a bigger variety, rotating movements, say on like a 6-month cycle where we're going between, maybe more machine stuff and then slightly less machine stuff, or even just like coming out of powerlifting and getting into bodybuilding after, like things like that, where it's just like bit more movement variety, and we have a bit of a better understanding of like bigger systems outside of just like stability and neuromechanical matching, where we're like, oh, let's look at it from like a different lens as well. Like maybe if I do something that's slightly less optimal, I have more injury resilience and then I can train for longer. So actually it was more optimal because now this other person who only does this thing is injured because they never did this other thing. And we can't link those two things necessarily, but history repeats itself, and obviously success leaves clues and whatnot. And so, that's why I always go, it's just the lack of nuance, right? It's just like the nuance you just went into there is awesome, where it's like, here's a reason I think something might happen. Here's like sort of why I do it. I could be wrong, but I have a good feeling. And I think that like none of us who really understand this stuff are ever 100% sure. And I think that speaking with like absolute certainty is usually a red flag, right? And so like I could be wrong. I think, like, or even what I'm saying with the injury stuff, it's like, I was like, well, you have no proof that this causes this. It's like, yeah, but like if you've been around strength sports long enough and different demographics, and you sort of, I know we don't have a study on it, but science is inherently flawed. Like it's just our best guess, right? Most of the time, you could pick apart any study and say it's wrong. So, I think that what you changed your mind on was, that was great, and I even hearing it, I think I might maybe go back to some more fun stuff that I maybe haven't done in a while. And I did some bent over rows for a video a while back, and like didn't progress my T-bar, and I was like, oh fucking, because I was filming, right, and I had to do it for a video, but I enjoyed it. I think it's fun. Man, I think we're coming up on 2 hours, man. I think we've probably lost a lot of people. I had more topics here. I think we definitely have room for another one in the future if you're keen, and I'm sure people would definitely love to have you back and see it again. I know you're very busy. I won't take up much more.
Well, yeah. Look, if people made it this far, then drop a comment and let us know if you want us to do another one, and by all means, we can.
Yeah, I'll pass the feedback on. I know that people were very excited, like asking me when it was out, what I'm posting it on, and blah, blah, blah. They were like, I didn't know you guys had a podcast. I was like, no, we don't. Like, maybe I should have explained it better, because even you were asking me. It's just gone on the YouTube. I'll link it and whatnot. But yeah, man, I've had a lot of fun. I'd love to have you back on eventually. Obviously, we've sort of spoken in the past, but never really, sat down and sort of done something like this. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think dialogue, conversation like this stuff, it's really important, long form conversation and a chance for people to hear some of the nuance. And, hopefully we've communicated that here. Hopefully no one's walking out of this and saying, oh, Jake said absolutely, I need to do 20 different exercises and therefore I'm going to, okay, everything I've been doing is wrong. We're not saying that. We're just presenting alternative perspectives and opinions. And hopefully that, I guess, gives people a way of how they should be thinking about some of these things. So yeah, I'm grateful to have conversations with people like yourself where, people are just happy to chat and see what do we see.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, man. Thank you so much for this. If you made it this far, as Jake said, leave a comment. Let us know. I know you guys will let us know if you want to do it again, if you want us to do it again, rather. But if you got this far, thanks very much for listening, and I'll see you all in the next one.